remote and desolate deserts of the American Southwest, far from the bustling cities and deep within the Navajo Nation reservation, lived an enigmatic figure, a man named Jacob. To outsiders, he seemed like an ordinary member of the Navajo community, quiet and unassuming. But those who knew the dark whispers of the land understood the truth. Jacob was a skinwalker. The Navajo people had their own legends and beliefs about skinwalkers, individuals who could harness dark magic to shapeshift into animals and cause harm to others. These sinister beings were feared and abhorred, but their existence was an unfortunate reality in these parts. Jacob, once a respected medicine man, had been tempted by the forbidden knowledge of skinwalking, delving into the darkest of ceremonies and rituals. It wasn't long before he became corrupted by the power, and he used his newfound abilities to terrorize his own people. One sweltering summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the vast desert in shades of crimson and gold, Jacob, in his wolf-like form, stalked the reservation. His eyes glowed with an unnatural malevolence, and he moved silently through the shadows. He targeted a humble Navajo family, the Benalis, who lived in a remote hogan. The scent of despair and fear hung heavy in the air, and it was this scent that drew Jacob to them. As he prowled around the hogan, the Benalis huddled together inside, sensing the presence of evil outside. The grandmother, a wise and elderly woman, recognized the signs. She began chanting ancient prayers, her voice trembling but resolute. The prayers seemed to infuriate the skinwalker. With a bone-chilling howl, Jacob launched a ferocious attack on the hogan. The family inside could hear the scraping of claws against the wooden walls and the guttural growls of the beast outside. But the prayers held a power of their own, a protective force that kept the creature at bay. It couldn't breach the hogan. Frustrated and defeated, the skinwalker eventually retreated into the desert night. The Benalis, though shaken, were spared that night, thanks to the protective prayers of the grandmother. They knew they were lucky, for not all who encountered a skinwalker were as fortunate. Jacob, consumed by the malevolent spirit of the skinwalker, would continue to stalk the night, a twisted and tortured soul, forever trapped between the worlds of man and beast. The Navajo community would live in constant fear, knowing that darkness lurked in their midst. A reminder that even the most ancient and mystical beliefs could hold terrifying truths. On the remote plains of New Mexico, rancher Sam Anderson lived a solitary life on his sprawling ranch. The vastness of the land offered him solitude and tranquility, but the isolation also left him vulnerable to the unknown. For weeks, Sam had sensed a presence, an eerie feeling that he was being watched. At night, he'd hear strange whispered chants carried by the wind, words he couldn't understand. The unease settled like a storm cloud over his life, causing sleepless nights and paralyzing anxiety. One moonless night, as the temperature dropped and the only illumination came from the starlit sky, Sam heard the haunting chants grow louder. He instinctively knew they were drawing closer, and a shiver ran down his spine. He loaded his shotgun and stepped onto his porch, scanning the vast expanse of his land. And then he saw him. A tall, dark figure emerged from the shadows, walking with an eerie grace. Sam's heart pounded, and he called out, "Who are you, and what do you want?" The figure didn't respond but continued to approach, now only a few feet away. Its face was hidden by a hood, and it was covered in layers of tattered clothing. Suddenly, the figure began to convulse, as if in the throes of a terrible transformation. Sam's eyes widened in terror as he watched the figure's form shift and contort. it transformed into a creature that defied nature, a skinwalker. Its limbs elongated, and its eyes glowed with malevolence. A twisted, grotesque version of humanity now stood before him. In the voice of someone Sam had once known, the creature whispered, "You should have left, Sam." A surge of panic coursed through Sam as he realized he was facing a person he had known, a Native American from a nearby reservation. But this was no longer human. It was a malevolent force. Before he could react, the Skinwalker lunged, moving with unnatural speed and strength. Sam fired his shotgun, but it only grazed the creature. The Skinwalker's taloned fingers tore into Sam's flesh, and in that moment, terror mingled with agony. With a surge of adrenaline, Sam managed to break free, scrambling back into his cabin. The Skinwalker, now howling with fury, pursued him. Sam barred the door, praying that the creature couldn't breach it. For hours, they were locked in a terrifying standoff. The creature circled the cabin, scratching and clawing at the walls. Sam knew he couldn't survive this ordeal. As dawn broke and the first light of day spilled over the land, the Skinwalker retreated, its power waning with the vanishing night. It disappeared into the wilderness, leaving Sam battered and shaken, a witness to the chilling horrors of the Skinwalker. Though he survived that night, the experience haunted Sam for the rest of his days, a reminder that sometimes there are malevolent forces lurking in the shadows of the world that defy explanation and terrify even the bravest among us. In the heartland of New Mexico, rancher Jake Carson found himself struggling to maintain his vast, sprawling ranch. The land was both his livelihood and his sanctuary, but the daily toil weighed heavily on his aging shoulders. That's when he met old Ezra, a wise and elderly Native American man who seemed to appear out of thin air. Old Ezra introduced himself as a member of the nearby Navajo community, and he offered his help, claiming he knew the land like the back of his hand. Grateful for the assistance, Jake welcomed him into his home and heart. For months, they worked side by side, mending fences, herding cattle, and even going on hunting trips deep into the wilderness. Old Ezra was a treasure trove of knowledge about the land, and his company was a solace to Jake, who had grown lonely in the vast expanse of the ranch. However, strange things began to happen. Jake would catch glimpses of old Ezra, muttering incantations under his breath, staring at him with piercing eyes that seemed to glimmer with an unsettling light. He dismissed these occurrences as quirks of a wise old man. One moonless night, as the wind whispered ominous secrets through the valley, old Ezra invited Jake on a night hunt, promising a bountiful harvest of deer. They ventured into the woods, their lanterns casting eerie shadows on the trees. As they tracked their prey, Jake noticed the old man's behavior becoming increasingly erratic. Old Ezra began to mutter strange words, and Jake felt like a helpless pawn in a ritual he couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, old Ezra turned and with terrifying speed lunged at Jake, his fingers turning into elongated, taloned claws. Jake's instincts kicked in, and he fought back, struggling to break free. The struggle was gruesome, the forest bearing witness to their deadly dance. The horrific truth revealed itself when old Ezra's human facade shattered, and he transformed into a grotesque, nightmarish creature, an embodiment of terror, a skinwalker. With inhuman strength, the Skinwalker overpowered Jake and pinned him to the forest floor. Its breath was foul, and its eyes were malevolent pools of darkness. It hissed, "You should have never trusted me." Jake, with the last reserves of his strength, managed to reach his hunting knife. With a desperate lunge, he plunged it into the Skinwalker's chest, unleashing an unearthly wail of agony. As the creature writhed in torment, Jake limped away, leaving the woods behind, shaken to his core. He would never forget that night when he befriended old Ezra, only to discover that the ancient darkness lurking in the land could take on the most human of guises. He returned to his ranch, forever haunted by the memory of the fateful night, and old Ezra's treacherous transformation into a Skinwalker. A reminder that evil could wear a familiar face and hide in the most unexpected of places. Deep within the rugged terrain of an ancient Indian reservation, 5 ranchers, Tom, Sarah, Daniel, Emily, and Alex, had chosen to build their lives on the sacred land, blissfully ignorant of the ancient, malevolent presence that had haunted these hills for generations. One chilly autumn evening, as the sun sank below the jagged peaks, the ranchers gathered around a roaring fire, the warm flames flickering in their eyes, and the stories of their ancestors echoing in the wind. But as the night deepened, they felt an uncanny unease settle over them. Their tales of skinwalkers and otherworldly beings became a haunting reality. The wind carried whispers that could not be attributed to nature alone. Odd sounds, like the faint rattling of bones, filled the air. They knew they were no longer alone. The ranchers' lanterns cast eerie shadows as they ventured deeper into the woods, seeking the source of the disquiet. As they reached the edge of the forest, a figure emerged from the shadows, resembling a disheveled, injured man. With a desperate tone, the figure, claiming to be lost, begged for their help. Sarah, the most compassionate among them, hesitated, convinced by the figure's pleading eyes. But Daniel, wary of the legends he had grown up with, looked past the figure's facade. He noticed the glint of malevolence in its eyes, the way its hands trembled. This was no ordinary lost soul. Suddenly, Emily called out, "Wait! Look at its feet!" There, hidden beneath the tattered clothing, were hooves. The creature's disguise was slipping. A tense silence enveloped the group as they realized the terrible truth. The figure before them was a skinwalker, an entity that had taken on the guise of a human. Panic welled up within them as they backed away, slowly. With an unholy screech, the skinwalker revealed its true form, a nightmarish creature with grotesque proportions, taloned fingers, and hollow eyes. It lunged at them, its malevolent laughter echoing through the forest. The ranchers scattered, pursued by the relentless skinwalker. The beast moved with supernatural speed and agility, darting among the trees. It played cruel games with their minds, imitating the voices of their loved ones, their pleas for help, and their screams of terror. As the night wore on, the ranchers regrouped near the heart of the forest. Sarah's compassionate nature turned into a deadly trap. The skinwalker, sensing her weakness, seized the opportunity. It lunged at her, its clawed hand piercing her heart. In their terror, the remaining ranchers managed to overpower the creature, using a torch to set it ablaze. The skinwalker howled in agony as its twisted form was consumed by fire. The ancient evil was vanquished, but at a heavy cost. Sarah lay lifeless, a tragic reminder of the horrors that had befallen them on that haunted reservation. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, the ranchers, shaken and scarred, knew that the memory of that night and the ancient darkness that had awakened in their midst would never truly fade.